And I think it started with that and me realizing that if nobody stands up for these stories, they're going to be misused.
Stay tuned for the show. Poets at War is sponsored by the following.
I'm Ian Wilson, and I create graphic art using primarily traditional methods, supplementing with digital where it's needed. I use a real pen, a real paper, a real graphite to make my art. I like to feel my art. I've always been this way. I love the feeling of a pen or pencil in my hand, the sound of graphite scratching paper, and I love the sight of a nice black line making its way across the page. So why choose traditional art over digital? Traditional art has an organic, natural quality that seems to be missing from most digital illustrations. The illustrated books and comics that were made in the days before digital have an excellence and staying power that is just as vibrant now as it was decades ago. These are the stories that stay with you. Dr. Seuss, Winnie the Pooh, Where the Wild Things Are. People still read these. I'm currently working on my own graphic novel series, Legend of the Swordbearer, and I've also had the privilege to draw graphics for 2 motion comic series, along with illustrations for a small magazine, Logosophia magazine, and various book covers. Don't let traditional art fade into the dust. Help me keep it alive. You won't regret it. Visit my website at ianthomaswilson.com for more info.
Welcome to the Frontline Soldier. Today on the show we have T.K. Wilson, author and lover of all things fairy tales and Disney movies. We discuss the Disney movie princesses and more. Get in the trenches, get dirty, it's Poets at War.
My book is on the final editing pass with Sarah Levesque.
Good.
So
Wonderful.
I'm going to have that out in October.
Exciting. Which one is that?
This one is basically a reimagining of the one that we met through, Tree Man and Roses.
Yes.
But it's a reworking. It's going to be a little bit more on the urban fantasy side.
Cool. Yes, I've heard you working on that. I'm excited to see how it comes out. Yeah, excited to promote it if I get the chance.
You'll be able to, believe me.
Wonderful. So yeah, well, that's good to hear. If you all hear any extra noises, it's just kids being loud before nap time. But yeah, so that's been good. We've been trying to get this one together for a while. You said you wanted in on talking about Disney princesses before I started doing individual generals report episodes on the individual princesses, and how how they've affected culture and all that other kind of stuff. But yeah, you had 3 particular ones to talk about today, and you've been on the podcast several times now, so I guess just fire away. We're just having a conversation, so what made you want to jump into the princesses?
Well, I was probably too old at the time, but I was among the first wave of girls who had access to the Disney Princess franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, it had just been the individual characters, and now there was the whole franchise universe thing, which, in my opinion, was a mistake. Because here's how it happened. Apparently, somebody who worked in marketing for Disney went to a Disney on Ice show and saw little girls wearing like generic dollar store princess stuff. And he went to Michael Eisner the next day and said, "Why don't we have our own merchandise line like this?"
Which, hey, I mean, that's his job.
that is his job. But, and of course, Eisner loved it and went a whole hog.
Of course he did, because he's Eisner.
Because that's what he did. And so, looking back at it now as an adult, I can see how the Disney Princess franchise was, I'm not going to say that it's necessarily bad, but it was, the way it was presented was damaging. In that it taught children from a very young age to expect certain things, to expect to be treated a certain way just because you're special or whatever. And quite frankly, it was a lot of consumerism.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I actually bought 3 DVDs from Thrift Books and Facebook Marketplace that were produced in 2002, 2003. And it was just the most awful thing I have ever witnessed. The only reason I bought them is because they have episodes of Aladdin the series on them. I'll get to that in a minute. And I'm just like, this is pure consumerist trash. This is awful. I realized that it was hot garbage.
Yeah.
And I was 12 at the time, which is technically too old, if you want to use those words. But
quote unquote. I mean, this is
too old.
We're all C.S. Lewis fans here. Is there really a too old?
Not really, no.
Yeah, come on.
So, and I'm watching this thing to make sure they all work, and I'm like, wow. I can see why people are complaining. I can see why people complained about this. And then you have the whole Disney wedding thing, which I think is kind of ridiculous. Admittedly, the one wedding I've been in, I was also 12 or 13 at the time as a junior bridesmaid. The bride had a very subtle Disney theme to it. She was a huge Mickey fan.
Yeah.
But the only thing she did was she had the little souvenir glasses, had Mickey and Minnie on them, you know, like they have made for weddings. And she and her husband wore Mickey ears to the reception. So that was really the only thing that she did. But, you know, the whole destination wedding and the themed engagement sets and the themed dresses. And I'm just like, wow, this is a lot. And then I realized that they trained these girls from the age of about 3 on up to expect the Disney princess treatment.
Yep.
If their parents just let the Disney princesses do the parenting for them, which my mom did not.
Right.
Obviously.
So what was the big difference there, in your opinion, between, like you said, letting them kind of babysit your kids and, you know, the other part? I think that there's obvious implicit messages there, but isn't there some impetus on the individual to figure out how to be not a jerk?
Excuse me.
That's okay.
Oh, there absolutely is 100%.
Did I make you do a spit take there?
Pretty close. But yeah, there should have been an impetus there for the child under the influence of the Disney princesses to come to a greater understanding of what being a princess means.
Right.
And being a princess is not being a jerk, being spoiled, expecting people to treat you differently. The fandom around Cinderella in particular, I'm like, did you learn nothing from the story?
Right. That's the one that really always gets me, is I hear all these people say stuff about how she was, you know, just all kinds of just waiting around for her Prince Charming. I'm like, no, she was working in a horrible situation and fighting to have a good attitude every day.
People don't think of the fact that they're looking through modern eyes.
Mm-hmm.
In Cinderella's time, there was no other option.
Right.
She had to stay there or be out on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't an option. So,
I mean, she's toward the very tail end of her childhood too. Let's just be real. You know, she's not some full-grown woman yet, really. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people think that, like, they hear the voice, and yeah, the voice is a lot, you know, more Hollywood kind of transatlantic sort of thing almost. But like, and that I think throws a lot of people. But she's a lot younger in that story, Disney's version, than a lot of people really even give her credit for.
Absolutely.
So like, going into Cinderella just a touch more, I think she's honestly, you know, people go Snow White's the first. They talk about that, and they talk about, you know, more of the modern ones. Some of them are better depending on the circumstances and some of the things that they do with the characters, but it just, like I said, it depends. But to me, the one that everything turns on is Cinderella.
Absolutely.
I think everything turns on Cinderella. She is good and bad and everything else. She is everything that every Disney princess is in a nutshell. And I think that most of the hate really gets lobbied at her more than probably any of the others individually.
No.
Maybe Ariel, you know, when it comes to the hate, comes close.
Yes.
But not quite, I don't think, as much as Cinderella. And it's a shame too, because that story, the way they did it, was excellent. There's certainly issues. I think the biggest issue is just far too much instead of squirrel, it's mice. Mice. Look, mice. You know, like Doug from Up, a squirrel, you know.
Yes.
But other than that, I mean, everything with actual Cinderella, with Lady Tremaine, which her voice actor is just chilling and always has been, because she's actually kind of a creepy person when you start to look into it. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if you had more thoughts specifically on Cinderella, but like I said, she's kind of, I feel like she's such a touchstone, we can't not talk about her, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And yet people do put undue blame on Cinderella because it's her castle that's in the middle of all the park.
Yeah, there's that too. Well, not all of them, but yeah.
Most of them have a Cinderella castle. I think
France is Aurora.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another thing. France does not have anything for Hunchback, which that's a whole nother issue. You had a movie studio right there, and you didn't put anything for Hunchback in there. Awesome. Anyway, but
I bet they figured, quite frankly, that you want to see Notre Dame, you're gonna go see Notre Dame while you're there. You know, I mean,
the actual place, you know, it's only 30 miles away,
right?
But Cinderella is the one. You know, Cinderella Ate My Daughter. That book was very popular for a few years, and now that I think about it, I think she's still getting pushed around.
Yeah.
She's still the scapegoat for everyone's problems, when it could be Snow White, who literally sang a song about "Someday My Prince Will Come."
Yeah.
You could be talking about Sleeping Beauty, who sang a song on a similar subject.
And barely appears in her own movie.
Exactly.
Right.
You could be talking about that, but instead you blame Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
Who is, if you look at some of the earlier franchise art, she's the one down front. She's the leader. She's the Optimus Prime of this group.
Yeah, I would say so.
So they see her as the leader. So she gets all the blame.
Yeah. Now, you know, you had 3 specific ones you wanted to talk about. Why don't we, since we're kind of on a negative note right now, and then work our way toward the end, get into more of the positive stuff. but I want to go through the negative. I want to be able to point this stuff out. So you remind me and tell the people where we're starting on your least favorite princess and why.
So hang on, I've got to go look up who they were.
Oh, okay. No problem. It's in the messenger. I believe it was Ariel, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Ariel. Okay, I have a very complicated relationship with Ariel.
Doesn't everyone?
Now, Ariel was my favorite princess from about age 2 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hate her as much as I once did.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, she's a brat. I'm just gonna say that Ariel is indeed a brat, and I would not let a hypothetical child watch that movie by herself. But I also feel like that she's a little bit more to be pitied than censured, because it's clear that Triton favors Ariel above all her sisters because she's the last one. We find out later that Ariel's mother was killed by pirates in the third movie.
Yeah, in the sequels, yeah.
In the sequels, they talk about what happened to Ariel's mom, and I don't remember ever them talking about it in the Little Mermaid television show.
It's implied in the movie, the first one, that humans were responsible.
So,
But it's not necessarily said. It is definitely, that's like, he wouldn't hate humans if not for something that they did. And yes, the mother's not there. So like I said, it's heavily implied, but they never go into detail in the original movie.
Yeah, and in the original fairy tale, Ariel has a grandmother, so there's that.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't without positive female influence in the fairy tale, but thinking about it now, I realize that if there had been an offer for her to become human without Eric, she would have taken the deal, because she was already curious about what humans were and what they had to offer.
Yes, which is especially true to the book. One of the few things really, really true to the book, because that was actually her first and most important reason. And I think that the reason they did Eric so specifically in the Disney version was to give her a more specific, attainable goal that people could root for, instead of, oh, she's human now, she got what she wanted, right?
Yeah, that wouldn't be much of a movie.
Right. But it's a great fairy tale.
It is. And the way they downplay the more religious aspects now is
just rip them right out of it.
It's disappointing.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Snow Queen, because the way that Gerda delivers Kay is through prayer and through the intervention of an angel. I mean, I'm not expecting anybody to do that, really.
Why not? We should be expecting that, but yeah.
And there's nothing saying we can't.
Right.
Because these are all in public domain. Nobody can stop you. So I don't think that Ariel deserves as much hate as she's getting. But I think she deserves some, but
yeah,
the same accusations can and should be leveled at Merida, for instance, who did but she's not sorry.
No, I was just going to say Merida's a whole other thing for me.
Another very complicated relationship I have with Merida. Because I liked the movie. I liked the fact that Merida sees much sooner the consequences of her actions than does Ariel. Ariel goes,
yeah, and my only issue with that is she doesn't really care about it once she does figure out. She just wants to fix it for the sake of fixing it, not because she was wrong.
That's a problem.
Major problem. Oh boy. But yeah, I mean, I think Merida would probably, I have to really think about it. I didn't think really hard about it before this, but she's close to one of my least favorites simply for that reason. I think that there is much to be done with the story that they have. I don't think they lean hard enough into the either mythology or the mysticism element of the story enough. I think it's very, very surface, and and you can still have your goofy, weird genie like witch person, and it still be like real, actual scary magic. But I think that they just gloss over it so much. It's like, why should I be worried that this person turned into a bear? With as wacky as this whole magical world is, like it could just flip back any second with no rhyme or reason.
Exactly.
You know? But yeah, I think that if I could do anything to two Disney movies with princesses, quite frankly, I would switch when two of them were made and just swap it. The Black Cauldron and Brave.
Mm-hmm.
I would switch when they were made because I feel like Brave would have been amazing back in that at that time, and there would be less for them to get hung up on in the sprawling epic that is Prydain. And I think that in this context, they would be, in a more recent context, they would be more inclined to do what Lord of the Rings had done, a few years prior to Brave and everything. And Prydain would have been better. But yeah, it's such a goofy, weird thing. But I mean, Goofy's in the company, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned two other very specific ones you wanted to talk about. They were, if I remember correctly here, Pocahontas and was it Jasmine? Okay. And then you had a brief mention of Belle and Mulan, which we can get to those if we have time, whatever you want to do. Take them in whatever order you want. These were the ones you wanted to talk about. Talk about why.
Okay, so Pocahontas is very problematic for me for a variety of reasons. I mean, they didn't really do anything wrong in producing this movie. They went out and they sought advice from Native Americans. They cast Native American actors. Mel Gibson was a brilliant choice for John Smith.
Oh yeah,
he really carried the movie.
Yeah, honestly. Him and Irene Bedard. I like Irene Bedard's voice. I think very soothing for the character. I think anytime those two are on screen, it's good. It's when you start getting into the other people, it's not as good, voice acting wise.
And David Ogden Stiers, of course, knocked it out of the park, but he always does.
Right, and he stands out in a way that like it doesn't fit. Like, so Shere Khan stands out in the Jungle Book because he's, your prim proper British bad guy. That's what we've always done. You make him so much more sly than you've got playing off of like Phil Harris, right? Mm-hmm. Being Baloo the bear, that sort of thing. So he sticks out in a way where you're like, oh, threat. Like there's something here that's different, right? Whereas in Pocahontas, we've got this thing where we got a whole bunch of very generic stooge level characters with British accents.
Yep.
And then we have John Smith with this incredibly like rich and soothing American accent. And then we've got this rich and soothing Native American accent. And it's like, wait a second, are we doing like the rich, soothing love kind of thing? And you could even throw Grandma Willow in that same category, even though she's got the rasp. It's a similar kind of thing, like similar feel. And then you've got all these British stooges, and then you've got the British bad guy. And it's like, and then you've got the Native Americans who, quite frankly, all the other ones just sound like people doing Native American accents. They don't sound like Native Americans, even if they are. You know what I mean? Yeah. The chief sounds so generic. I'm sorry, he does. I'm sure it was a real person with a real performance and whatever else, but it didn't fit. Especially when Irene Bedard and Mel Gibson are just knocking it out of the park. That's something that really always bugged me, is the voice acting in that movie is so like there's no planning involved other than make sure it's but yeah, go ahead.
But because of Pocahontas' stature as a real person,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she belongs in the franchise because she was real.
Right.
We know who she was. We know where she was. We don't know where she's buried because the church burned down where she is buried off of Gravesend.
Mm-hmm.
But she was real. She was baptized. She was a Christian. Pocahontas was just her nickname.
Right.
They don't call her by her real name.
Right.
They don't call her Matawaka or Rebecca.
Right.
So I just think it smacks of disrespect to a real live person for them to treat Pocahontas this way.
Yeah. But I mean, we have never really cared about Pocahontas in our culture, and I know that hurts a lot of people. But like, we really haven't. There's the white liberal side of things where they just want to, claim that they have care for all these people, and look at all the way these white people have totally gentrified her back in her day, and blah blah blah, and they act like they care. And then there's very, very few conservatives who even know her story to begin with.
Exactly. They can just put the painting up on top of Capitol Hill and say, "There's Pocahontas."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's sad. And yeah, I mean, so many people point to that one from all different kinds of things, but like I said, this is a bigger problem than all racial this, that, or the other, and problematic, and we're just collecting all the races and putting them into Disney movies. Like, this is way bigger than any of that. But no one wants to actually talk about, like you were saying, she was a real person. No one really wants to know what she actually thought of her life. No one actually looks into the things that she wrote and did and whatever else. And it's like, yeah, just stop. The movie is okay. Yes. Like I said, I think that there's two things that bother me. I think it being the big turning point besides The Lion King for when we lost Howard Ashman. Where Howard Ashman's stuff was no longer in anything. Like, he wrote most of the Aladdin songs before he died. But he never got to see them. When we go from, ridiculously jumpy, fluent, and just boisterous lines and of lyricism to Elton John, it's not as jarring. Because it's Elton John, and you're going into a movie where Elton John did the music with The Lion King, right? That's okay. So his stuff, though, he tried, I think, to mimic Howard Ashman and some of his lines, especially in things like Be Prepared. He's a little bit more verbose, which Ashman was mimicking the Sherman Brothers in being more verbose and using larger words, especially with like the genie and stuff like that. There's words in Genie's songs that are just like, kids aren't going to know what this means until they're like 30, And it's not that it's even inappropriate. It's just like Genie's just, razzle dazzling, right? And that's a big part of Disney magic that I don't think people really realize that Sherman Brothers brought in to begin with, and then Ashman continued. There's so many. Let's see. We'll prepare and serve a flair of culinary cabaret, right? Like, the little kids aren't going to know what that means. No. That's Beauty and the Beast, It's like, and when you go from Howard Ashman and then Elton John a year before to Tim Rice, it's really, really jarring.
Yeah, and people will point out that Tim Rice did The Lion King with Elton John.
Yes.
And Hans Zimmer, but it's for Lion King, it's Hans Zimmer and Lee Boehm who carry the day in that score.
Yes. And beyond the score, the lyrics, I guarantee you Elton John had more, especially after hearing, Pocahontas. The guy that's being paid more is Elton John. And if he wants a lyric one way, Tim Rice is going to bend. You know what I mean? And so, like, Tim Rice is not going to try to outright Elton John. It's just not going to happen. But I think Tim Rice got better toward the end of the Renaissance and into some of the other stuff. He got better, but his stuff never scratched the surface of Ashman and didn't come close to the Sherman Brothers at all. And I just think that like his besides the voice acting, I think that's the other thing that falls the most flat. There's so many lines in Savages. I think Colors of the Wind gets a pass. I think it's beautiful as is. I there's some words that are a little awkward, but like that was the point. It's supposed to sound Native American. It's supposed to sound non-traditional European Western, right? And then, you know, Riverbend, it has some awkward lines in the verses. There's a lot of awkwardness that I think he was trying to put it there for the purpose like he did in Colors of the Wind, but it just doesn't work in those other places. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
So, but yeah, so well, let's see. We touched on Pocahontas. We've got If You Want, Belle and Mulan, but Jasmine specifically to get into. Now, I know you're a huge fan of the Aladdin TV show, and I have to think that this factors in because I did not see much of the Aladdin TV show growing up. When I see her in the original movie, I'm like, she's good. She's not top tier for me, but she's not bad by any stretch. No. So I want to hear. Yeah, what you got?
So, in the Aladdin TV show, they decided to actually follow the continuity of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
They kept Aladdin and Jasmine together. They didn't have a whole lot of relationship drama, which is refreshing now that I think about it.
Yeah, it is.
And they also expanded on Jasmine's character as a person, because she went out and she went to the marketplace in the original movie, but she didn't see too much of what goes on behind the marketplace. You know, she didn't see how the poor people in her kingdom live.
Mm-hmm.
So in a couple of episodes, they have her going out, and at one point she's transformed by a silly wish into a literal street rat. She's a rat.
Yeah.
And she's able to see from a rat's eye view all these poor people who, I remember a scene specifically, I haven't seen this episode in years, where Jasmine goes up to this one little hovel and she looks in the window and she sees a widowed mother and her 2 kids. And all they have is 5 dates to eat in the entire house. And the mom says, 1 date each, we must save the rest for tomorrow. And she doesn't eat any. She sets 1 date in front of her boy and her girl, and that's all they have. And then Jasmine is like, well, this isn't right.
Right.
We have plenty of food. So she goes out as a rat, and Iago is with her as a frilled lizard. And they grab a melon from the melon guy. The same melon guy that Aladdin stole a melon from earlier in the movie.
Nice.
And they bring it to the doorstep, and they think, and the kids say, oh, it's a magic rat. She brought us food. And so when she gets turned back, she goes to her father and she said, Father, we must do something about these poor people in our kingdom. We must do something to help. And the father's like, there are poor people?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love that guy. Jafar, Watson, hello. Wasn't he originally voiced by the guy who played he did, I think it was in the remake of Miracle on 34th Street, played Santa Claus or something.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, he's just like there's no way you can hear that voice and be like, ever think that he could ever say a mean thing. There's something about that voice that just
exactly.
He's like the teddy beariest of teddy bears.
And so they do stuff like that in the TV show, and they have her in another episode. They go visiting on a diplomatic mission. The Sultan sends Jasmine on a diplomatic mission to this country in Africa. But they don't say it's Africa. It's called Waziristan or something like that. It's Africa.
Right. Yeah.
where the weather is entirely controlled by the king's mood.
Mm-hmm.
When the king is happy, there is prosperity everywhere, and when the king is upset, there is, calamity and destruction. However, the king is a child of about 10 who has been spoiled his whole life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the courtiers in the palace are trying their best to keep him happy. And the only thing that really makes him happy is hearing Jasmine telling stories.
Okay.
So
they do the Shahrazad thing?
Yeah, she does the Shahrazad thing.
Nice.
And so the next thing that happens is the Grand Vizier, who is, supposed to be watching the throne for the kid, says, "Oh, you can't leave." So, and Jasmine's like, "Well, I have to leave." And the king throws a temper tantrum, and there's calamity all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And they do manage to escape in the confusion, and they get to this cave where a bunch of the people of Waziristan are hidden out, and they're like, "This is all your fault. Our king is upset because you wanted to leave." And Jasmine is like, "They're right. I have to stay. A princess does what's best for other people."
I gotcha. Well, that's yeah, it sounds like they did some of their best work from the Disney TV stuff in that situation. I think that they, in many cases, don't get a chance to touch those characters very much, but it sounds like they really did do some improvements in what they wanted to do for a change. I know she's a lot more interesting in some of the later movies and things, and I have seen the other two movies and whatnot, and I've heard stuff about the series. I haven't watched a whole lot of it, but it sounds like a good reason to be liking her.
Go ahead. The other thing about that is that they don't acknowledge Aladdin the series ever happened. They buried it.
Right.
Even though they still play it in Middle Eastern countries and they love it.
Right.
Play it.
And then Buzz Lightyear, Star Command, and all these other shows. It's like, we don't care about this. I'm like, can we bury some of the sequels instead?
Exactly. Did we really need that Lady and the Tramp movie?
Do we really need Hunchback of Notre Dame too?
Oh my God. I saw that animation. I'm like, you did better on Gargoyles. What is wrong with you people?
Yeah. So
with a much smaller budget, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but so you mentioned Belle and Mulan. I think that one other thing I want to touch on before we close too is some of the newer princesses, the CG princesses, and maybe, although I don't think you've seen it, Tiana from Princess and the Frog. I think you told me you hadn't seen it. Gotcha. Yeah. So why don't you start with Mulan? Because I have a lot more to say about Belle, and then we can touch briefly on some of the newer princesses and things, and start going toward wrap up after that. You want to start with Mulan?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I have only been to a movie theater about a handful of times in my life. One of them was to see Mulan. We were originally going to see Madeline. My grandma took my brother and I to the theater to see Madeline, which I'm glad we didn't, because we would have ended up walking out of Madeline. For various reasons, including the underwear joke. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So my grandma would have been terribly embarrassed and we would have walked out of the theater. But Mulan is what is, I think, no, I vaguely remember seeing Lion King in the theater. But that was the first time I really remember seeing a movie in a theater. So Mulan has a special place in my heart for that.
Gotcha.
And that started my fascination with Oriental culture, both China and Japan. Because I just found the whole aesthetic of the movie fascinating. Even though it's Americanized and all that jazz.
Oh, yeah.
But they took into account the Chinese traditions and the musicals that were already in existence of Mulan from China at the time. They even borrowed Shang's name from one from the 50s called Lady General Hua Mulan. Which was by the Communist Party, obviously, but eventually the lady who played Mulan and the guy who played Li Shang fled to America. So
that's funny.
And so they took that into account. They took into account the art style, and I mean, I love the music, even though it's not, it's not really the best, but
yeah, it's got some Tim Rice-isms in it.
And I just loved the whole idea that she did rebel, but she did it for a specific reason.
Right.
She did it for her family.
There was no self-expression.
No, she did not do this because she wanted to be male. She did not do this because she wanted anything but to prove herself to her country that she wasn't worthless, even because she was the only child and a daughter.
And to save her dad.
And to save her father.
That's the biggest motivation.
Yeah, from dying.
Yeah.
And because I feel a kinship to her because my dad was in the military at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was in the Army at that point. He was in both Army and Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think I have a kinship with Mulan because of the military aspect. Because we both knew what it was like to be afraid for our father.
I always thought of all the Disney princesses, really, truly all of them, all of the ones that were based on a legend of some kind, Mulan is by far the oddest choice to adapt.
Oh, absolutely.
Considering that it was originally a propaganda piece to shame males into joining the military.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just odd. I think that, a slightly to kind of sort of paraphrase it into a Western context is almost as if they would have made a Rosie the Riveter. I know this isn't a 1-to-1, but a Rosie the Riveter movie.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That would be the closest equivalent I can think of. Like I said, Rosie was more to encourage women to, join up with the war effort and do their part. But it's such a just basically similar idea. They were both propaganda pieces, whatever, and involved women and whatnot and non-traditional roles. But it's just for that reason alone, I think the fact that Mulan is as good as it is shocking to me. I think it is the one that I going in, and I say going in when I was that came out when I was 8 or 9, and so I didn't get to see it until later and blah blah blah, but of all the ones that I saw and had expectations beforehand and then saw it and whatever else, that I think was the one that surprised me the most of how much I liked it. Mulan is a very surprising movie all around. I really do like it for that. You mentioned Belle. Belle is my favorite for all kinds of reasons, most especially nostalgic ones. Beauty and the Beast was one of my absolute favorite movies growing up. It is still my second favorite movie of all time. It is just an absolute masterpiece of animation and music and voice acting.
Oh yeah.
I think the voice acting doesn't get enough credit.
Absolutely not.
Robbie, is it Benson, if I remember correctly, and Paige O'Hara particularly. And then the other one that really steals the show, in my opinion, is why can I never forget his name? Law and Order guy is Lumiere. Yeah, Orbach. Yeah, I know who he is. I always forget his name.
Remember his name.
He's just
like a Jerry.
He is, quite frankly, with maybe the exception of the only one that really comes close to me is Shadow Man as the villain. But he is by far, let's put it this way, the most charismatic side character in any Disney movie ever. So I just absolutely love Lumiere. I loved Lumiere as a kid. I still love Lumiere now. And Paige O'Hara as Belle is one of the most, and it hurts me because I think that there was something there. Haha. Ha ha ha. That was a pun. I didn't mean to do that, but I laugh at it anyway. There was something there between her and her voice director that did not translate to any of the sequels. She sounds so insincerely over earnest in every other thing that she's in as Belle.
Yes.
But in Beauty and the Beast, that is one of my all-time favorite female vocal performances in anything. Just the level of pain in her voice as she's losing her father, the level of interest and change, and helping Beast as she helps him, come around on a lot of things. The way that she so tenderly talks to him and also stands her ground is just it had to be absolutely pitch perfect, or else the movie would not have worked. I feel like the most load-bearing bolt in this entire machine of a movie is absolutely Paige O'Hara's voice performance.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it gets near enough credit for how nuanced and beautiful it really is.
It does not.
But yeah, you go ahead, talk more about Belle. Yeah.
So, Belle was a character that I related to. Beauty and the Beast was like second after Aladdin for me when I was after I got over my Ariel stage. It was like second after Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast is still one of my favorite fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's top one, bar none, followed by a couple of other obscure French stories and Swan Lake,
mm-hmm.
which I could talk about Swan Lake forever. But I loved that Belle liked to read, and that she stood up for herself when the Beast was being mean to her.
Yep. And
when people started lobbing the Stockholm Syndrome accusation at her, I was like, oh, it's on now.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it's only when people really call out what they think is a problem that I realize how important these characters are to me. And when people started saying Belle has Stockholm Syndrome, she should have wanted to escape more, all this nonsense. And then they started making the correlation between Beauty and the Beast and 50 Shades of Grey a couple of years ago. I was just like, no, that's not right.
I sit there and I go, did you go take a bathroom break during something there? Because if you did, I don't blame you. Like that song is so unbelievably important to the plot. But if you weren't listening to it, or you were checking your phone at the time, or went to the restroom, I get it.
Exactly. He has to change first. She doesn't put up with any of his temper tantrums, and she yells at him right back when he yells at her for hurting him when she's trying to clean his cuts. And so she gives it right back. She gives it as good as she's got. And the Beast scares her when she goes into the West Wing. He doesn't lay a finger on her. He smashed something near her, but he didn't hurt her. And he is ashamed of himself that he scared her.
I heard a recent hot take. That was way better than the Stockholm one. I just wanted to throw it out there to you and to the people, and you do with it what you will. It's more of a shocking horror kind of a hot take. What was in the West Wing?
Smashed up furniture.
What were all the people?
Furnishings. Oh no.
I'm just saying, with his temper, that could totally be a thing.
Absolutely.
but I'm okay with that hot take. It has some issues for later on when he has to get people to clean out the West Wing, you know, for them to move in or whatever. But like, whew. Anyway,
It also kind of got that whole Bluebeard thing going on there. Now that just say something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The bloody chamber and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But as far as that goes, I mean, I saw that thing about 50 Shades of Grey, and I used to run a review group on Facebook, and for 3 years in a row, every February, I would do a Beauty and the Beast special.
Mm-hmm.
I would talk about different interpretations of the story, because every year for 3 years they'd have the 50 Shades of Grey movies
Mm-hmm.
come out around Valentine's Day. And still to this day, February is like fairy tale month for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I start thinking about the fairy tales and the Disney movies and other like fantasy type movies and TV shows and poems that I've loved. So, and I think it started with that and me realizing that if nobody stands up for these stories, they're going to be misused.
Oh yeah.
We see that with Cinderella, because we see that with Cinderella, we see that with Beauty and the Beast, we see that with, I can't really think of any other ones right now that are like that.
Rapunzel is one that the people go too hard into the homeschool aspect at times.
Oh yes.
I agree. She's totally like Glenn Keane, you know, and the other people. Like he started that part of her personality, and the other guys finished it. But like he definitely had. There's no doubt in my mind he had some homeschooled people that he'd met in his mind and had leaned into that with the original writing. I think people lean too hard into her being a bubblehead. And that's something that's levied at a lot of these girls, you know. And I don't think that we can lump characters like Moana into the feminist category either.
No.
Moana is not Raya by any stretch. And that's a whole other conversation, you know. But getting into the CG princesses just a little bit, I think while we're not on a good trajectory, stupid is not a sustainable strategy for the box office. So quite frankly, I wanted to get your opinion on any and all that stood out to you. I mentioned Rapunzel. I think she's a very obvious standout. I think Tiana doesn't get the credit she deserves, but like I said, you haven't seen it. So she is excellent as a character. And then Moana in particular also really, I think that's what started this Disney princess thing and me wanting to go into each of them individually, because did you see that episode, me talking about Moana?
Yes. I think I did,
yeah. I mean, she means a lot to me because the whole idea of I see this destination that makes sense to who I am as a person, but I don't want to leave my family behind, is something that I had never seen so perfectly done. And it is essentially the anti-Ariel. She actually counts all the cost to a fault. And I think that is a much better story than what we kind of got with Ariel. So
good. Absolutely. I mean, I love Tangled. Tangled is probably the best recent Disney movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's up there,
because
man.
People, when it first came out, I heard people in Christian circles saying that Rapunzel is a bad example because she rebels against her parent. And I'm like, Gothel isn't actually her parent. Gothel kidnapped her. why are you blaming the victim here? If she found out in any other way before, you wouldn't blame her for trying to escape.
Right. She didn't want, and the other thing is like, okay, so Ariel actually wanted to completely leave her family 110%.
Yep.
And never come back and be, completely autonomous and separate from everything that she was tied to previously. Rapunzel wanted a road trip.
Yep.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the same thing with Cinderella. She wanted to go to a party and relax for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't go there planning to meet the prince. She wanted to go there and dance and have fun.
Right.
Because she wasn't allowed to have fun at home.
And see what it is. What is that thing? I need to know what that thing is.
Exactly.
It's that simple. And she just wanted knowledge of the situation. She was told no. Yes, she disobeyed. But through the disobedience, there was restoration for years and years and years and years of what she knew underneath it all to be wrong. Something was wrong. The fact that she couldn't know it was wrong. And yeah, you can go back and you can compare that to Garden and blah, 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 and be like, yeah, but she still disobeyed. I'm like, yeah, but she kind of got her comeuppance in lots of ways. She did not win her story in the end by anything particularly special. And she did. I hate the Deus Ex Machina claims, about the tear and whatever else. I'm like, that's in the original story. That's where the trope came from. Yeah. You can't not do that. Yeah. You can't not do the tear. Yeah. And the people miss the fact that that's not just a tear of I'm sorry for myself or I'm sorry for Eugene. That tear was a penitent tear. Mm-hmm. That was a tear for I'm sorry for all of the bad that has happened to me and through me.
Exactly.
And so like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you on that one, man. Like,
yeah. That was like a minority view, but it was one that I saw bandied around on like Plugged In.
That's the same people with Romans 13 and the pandemic.
Exactly. Now let me see. Then, I mean, I haven't seen Princess and the Frog, but I've seen of Tiana. I'm like, now that is a role model for girls.
Yes.
She works hard. She knows that she's not going to get any breaks.
And I love the fact too. This is not a huge spoiler, but it's a little bit toward her character. I won't go into specifics of what happens, but she also learns the other half of that. And the whole point is her and the prince kind of have this half and half. He's a lazy good for nothing who just wants to play and have fun. And she, it's grasshopper and the ant kind of stuff, right? And she works actually too hard. She's a workaholic, and she doesn't really in the end, like she thinks she knows what she wants, but she doesn't really know what she wants. And it's a powerful movie because of that. I think that, it feels like they got on the bike and rode again. So there's a little bit of like stuff where you go, oh, yeah, they're just kind of phoning this part in, as far as the story goes, whatever else. But it's phoned in Disney Renaissance. It's what took us to the dance. You know what I mean? Yeah. And as a result, the movie is like mid to higher tier. I'd put it in the same, except for the weird Eisner stuff, I'd put it in the same category as like a Hercules. Oh yeah. Obviously all the weird Eisner stuff in Hercules like makes it particularly a strange movie, but I'm saying quality wise it's on a same footing as like a Hercules. So
and then we got Frozen, which is okay.
How have we not talked about Frozen yet? Frozen is I think like Lion King for a while. If you talk to any Gen X person, they hate the Lion King because of what it did to them because of their kids. And I think it's similar with Frozen. There's issues with Frozen, no doubt. I think there's more issues in number 2 than number 1. But I think there's something to Elsa's self-discovery stuff that so many people don't want to say is good because of the way our culture is going. And I'm like, yeah, there's something in there that's not good. But there's also something in there that's really, really good. And that is that there are people in this world that people don't take the time to understand who are actually orthodox in their beliefs, who are, you know, totally on team good guys the entire time.
Exactly.
And no one takes the time necessary to make it happen. And that's one of the reasons I like Anna being so gosh darn stubborn. She's gonna save her sister. So there's good stuff there, you know.
Yeah.
No one wants to really talk about it. I don't know why. It's always negative with Frozen. But yeah, I totally get the bad side too. I do.
I mean, yeah, people are once again misusing a thing,
Right.
to excuse or explain something that they either really like or they don't like.
Right.
So, you know, people blame Elsa for whatever. You know, she's getting the same treatment as Cinderella, as I mentioned before,
Right.
or
Mhm.
Belle. And people forget that the story centers around two girls who have been isolated from other people through no fault of their own.
Gee, that sounds familiar.
So, of course, when Elsa has the opportunity to do something that she's always wanted to do, she's going to take the opportunity because she couldn't do it before. I kind of almost liken it to siblings who one sibling has some kind of disability or illness.
Yep.
In Elsa's case, it happened to be ice powers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it could be a picture of siblings who has a sibling in a wheelchair, or
Well, hey, you could even do, you know, one of them's a bastard. You could do that as an analogy. You know what I mean? There's lots of ways you can take that, and there's a lot of good analogies that come out of it. I think the other thing that really hits me with Elsa in particular is, you know, her other big song that I don't think gets enough credit is in the second movie, Show Yourself.
yes.
That movie, or excuse me, that song, that video, that whole sequence, I got something totally different than what everyone else got when I first came out of the movie. And I then I saw where they were going, and I'm like, okay, all right. But the thing that I got from that is she's looking for the transcendent source of not just her power, but her purpose.
Exactly.
And when she finds it, it's not just her. Like, I know the mom kind of says that it's her in the song, but the fact is her mom had to tell her that. And that says something really huge. There's a line in Moana that echoes this same thing, and I think they're actually getting toward, and what some of them want to get toward. Some people want it to go toward your own self-actualization, and some of the people working on it are trying to go into your heritage and your history.
Absolutely.
And with Moana, when she says, I am everything I've learned and more, still it calls me. She's standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think that being at Disney, being an animator, being a person who's writing these songs, you know, Lin-Manuel Miranda, whoever else, you're sitting there and you're walking in and you realize you are standing on the shoulders of Howard Ashman and the Sherman Brothers. You are standing on the shoulders of the 9 Old Men. And yeah, you might be screwing it up because you've got some weird, wacky worldviews, but the fact is you can't divorce yourself from that.
Exactly. No matter how hard you try.
Right. And yeah, no matter how hard you try. That's literally a line from Moana.
Yeah, I mean, they try to bury what they feel is embarrassing, like some of the stuff they did during the war, the black sentiment.
What made the red man red?
What was that?
I said, what made the red man red?
Yes, that too.
Which is a great song, quite frankly.
It is very catchy.
And it's comedic and it's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a really good place to end this, discussion specifically, is fairy tales and princesses, and what they actually mean in our culture and the way Disney has actually influenced for good and ill over the years. We can't divorce ourselves from that.
No.
And so the best thing to do is to not just chew up the meat and spit out the bones, but actually show where the bones are to all the future generations.
Exactly.
And let's make better movies. Let's get Christians back in the industry and let's change this.
Amen.
Disney's ours, man. We're the ones who wrote those stories, hundreds of years ago.
Exactly.
The Christians were the ones who wrote these stories down. And honestly, many of them didn't even care if they got credited. They were just storytellers by nature,
Exactly.
And so, yeah, just everybody, I'm just going to wrap this, TK. If you have any stuff to plug, I want to hear that first, though. Yeah, let's do that first. Do you have anything you want to plug? I know you're be on the lookout for your book coming out. And anything else you want to plug? Yes,
my book will be coming out in October, hopefully the middle part of next month. It will be titled Chronicle of the Hidden People, Volume 1, Book of the White Raven. And that will be under TK Wilson? Yes, that will be under TK Wilson. Okay, awesome. If you want to keep up to speed on that, I have a Facebook page for Chronicle of the Hidden People. It's Chronicle of the Hidden People. If you recognize my brother Ian's work, it will be there. Okay. You'll be able to find it. All righty. Yep, go ahead. I think that's about it. Awesome. Well, stuff I want to plug? Yeah, well, I was kind of excited to do a scatter shot, and now I'm excited to do a deep dive with some of the generals reports here soon, going into the individual princesses. I hope you tune in for those. And if you have anything particular to chime in about any of them or anything you want me to cover, let me know. It's been super fun talking. Everybody, be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left, and the Lord will be with you wherever you go. Let's write some good fairy tales in the trenches on Poets at War. God of song said